Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful and transformative journeys that inspire change and growth. Today's story follows Madison, a woman who has always put others first, sacrificing her own happiness and well-being for her family. As Christmas approaches, she finds herself exhausted and unappreciated, until a long-lost connection with her father forces her to confront the painful truths of her past. Join us as we explore her journey of rediscovery, healing, and the profound lessons she learns about family, love, and self-worth. Subscribe to our channel to start today's story. Madison sat in her small Chicago apartment, the dim light from the street casting long shadows across the room. Her phone vibrated again, rattling against the wooden nightstand. She didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. She had already seen the 10 missed calls earlier. Her mother. With a deep sigh, she picked up the phone. Bracing herself. Madison, finally, I've been calling you all evening. Her mother's voice was a mix of relief and exasperation. Madison closed her eyes and leaned back against the couch. I've been busy, Mom. It's the end of the year. Work is insane. Her mother didn't acknowledge her exhaustion. Well, Christmas is almost here. I want to have a big celebration this year. All the relatives are coming. 15 people, at least. And you'll buy presents for everyone. Won't you? You always choose the best gifts. The familiar manipulative tone sent a dull ache through Madison's head. She pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed again. Mom, you're all I can count on. Sweetheart, don't you care about your family? There it was. The guilt. The old tactic her mother had mastered over the years. It crept into Madison's chest, curling around her heart like a vice. A deep-rooted instinct told her to say yes, to agree without hesitation, to carry the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders for as long as she could remember. All right, she murmured. How many people exactly? 15, maybe more. Feel free to spend whatever you need. I trust your taste. Madison did the math. Even at a modest $50 per person, that was at least $750. Combined with the monthly support money she sent her mother, it meant dipping into her savings again. I got it, she said, forcing the words out before she could think too much about them. Wonderful. Oh, and don't forget Caitlin's present. She's been eyeing the new Louis Vuitton holiday collection. Madison barely had time to process before her phone chimed again. A message from her younger sister. Caitlin, don't forget my present, the LV bag. You absolutely can't forget. She turned her phone face down on the coffee table and let out a slow breath. Outside, snow had begun to fall. The streetlights caught the delicate crystals as they drifted down. A fleeting kind of beauty that felt almost mocking. It had snowed that day, too, 10 years ago, the day her parents' divorce was finalized. She could still hear the echoes of her mother's sobs. The way she had clung to Madison, whispering through her tears, "That man never gave us anything." Madison had believed her, had sided with her. She had never spoken to her father since. The next evening, she made her way through the bustling holiday crowd at the mall. Her arms already weighed down with bags. She moved from store to store, carefully selecting gifts, things she knew each family member would love. A cashmere stole for Aunt Linda, the latest cookbook set for her cousin Jessica, the newest video games for the kids, an expensive necklace for her mother, and, of course, the Louis Vuitton bag for Caitlin, which had cost far more than she could afford. Her credit card would suffer, but at least no one would complain. As she stood in line at the checkout, her eyes wandered across the store, and then, a familiar face. James Walker, her father. He was standing by a display of scarves, turning one over in his hands. He looked older, more tired than she remembered, but there was something achingly familiar about him. Her heart clenched. She hadn't prepared for this moment. He hesitated, then approached. Madison? His voice carried a mix of concern and nostalgia, as if he had been waiting years for this chance. She stiffened. I'm fine. A beat of silence stretched between them. He started, but she had already turned, gripping her shopping bags tighter. Without another word, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. And yet, as she rode the escalator to the next floor, her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't shake the image of his tired eyes. The the softness in his voice. Her first reunion with her father in a decade. But it wasn't supposed to matter. She had a family to take care of. A Christmas to orchestrate. She forced her emotions aside and returned to her shopping. There was no time for anything else. The days leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of exhaustion and relentless duty. Madison threw herself into the process of buying, wrapping, and organizing gifts with a dedication that bordered on obsession. It had become a ritual, one that allowed her to ignore the growing fatigue in her bones, the ache in her heart. She found herself in the living room of her mother's house on Christmas Eve. Her arms loaded with carefully chosen gifts wrapped in elegant paper and coordinated ribbons. The house was a picture of holiday cheer. The scent of pine and cinnamon wafted through the air, mingling with the warm light spilling from the windows. There were life-sized reindeer outside and twinkling icicle lights that cascaded from the roof. It was as if the whole world had conspired to create the perfect Christmas. Madison stepped out of her car, glancing at the bags of presents that filled the back seat. They were a symbol of her role, the giver, the provider, the family Santa. She couldn't remember a time when it had felt different. This was what was expected of her. This was what she had to do. But as she approached the front door, she heard voices from inside. "Where's Madison? Is she still not here? I hope she bought exactly what I asked for last year. She got me something I didn't even want." Madison froze. Her mother's voice carried an edge of impatience, the tone that always made her feel like she was falling short. She gripped the gift bags harder and took a deep breath, steeling herself. She couldn't let them see how much their words affected her. When the door finally opened, her mother, Janet, greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Finally, you're here. Where's the rest of the presents? I thought you'd have more." Caitlin, her younger sister, stood behind their mother, dressed in a designer outfit that seemed to sparkle with the same pretentiousness that always radiated from her. Caitlin barely acknowledged Madison, too busy rummaging through the gift bags. "I got your Louis Vuitton bag from the holiday collection," Madison said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "You'll have to wait to open it." Caitlin raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "I hope it's the right one this time," she muttered, then turned back to her phone. Madison felt her heart sink as she entered the living room. The room was filled with relatives, all chattering with excitement as they admired the perfectly wrapped gifts under the Christmas tree. Aunt Linda complimented her on her taste in presents. Her cousin Jessica offered a polite smile as she thanked her for the cookbook. They all seemed so happy, so at ease, but Madison couldn't shake the hollow feeling that gnawed at her. The recognition in their voices, the praise for her thoughtful gifts, it all felt so empty. She had spent so much time and energy making sure everyone had what they wanted. But there was no room left for her. There was no one to give her a present, to acknowledge the sacrifices she had made. After dinner, amid rising expectations, her mother stood in the center of the room. She tapped her glass lightly with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "Now, it's time for the presents everyone has been waiting for. Madison has done it again. She's our family Santa." The relatives erupted into applause. As if she were some sort of hero, Caitlin rushed to the pile of gifts, eagerly tearing through the wrapping paper to reveal the bag she had demanded. "This is perfect," Caitlin exclaimed, holding it up for everyone to see. She immediately took a picture of it, no doubt planning to post it on Instagram. As the presents continued to be opened, Madison felt her chest tighten. There was nothing for her. No small token, no thoughtful gesture, only a pile of gifts for everyone else. When all the presents had been handed out, she finally gathered the courage to speak up. "Mom, where's my present?" Her voice faltered, and she immediately regretted asking. The room fell silent. Her mother smiled, but it was tight, almost forced. "Oh, sweetheart, we didn't prepare a present for you. But you bought presents for everyone, didn't you? You're the family Santa." Madison's heart dropped. Her mother's words hit her like a slap. She had given so much, worked so hard to make everything perfect. And yet, there was nothing for her. The exhaustion she had been trying to suppress came crashing down. And for the first time that evening, she felt tears threaten to spill. But she couldn't let them see. Caitlin laughed. "Santa wanting presents? That's hilarious." She was already busy uploading a photo of her new bag. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Some of the relatives shifted awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Aunt Linda shot Madison a sympathetic glance. But no one spoke up. Madison stood up slowly, the weight of it all pressing on her chest. She needed air. She needed to escape. "I'm going outside for a bit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No one stopped her. She stepped into the cold night air, the snowflakes falling softly around her. She leaned against her car, the chill of the wind biting at her skin. But it was nothing compared to the coldness in her heart. Tears blurred her vision as she stared at the Christmas lights in the distance. This was supposed to be a time of joy, of family, of love. But instead, it had become a performance, a never-ending act where she was the one who gave and gave, but never received anything in return. Why was it always her? Why did she have to be the one to make Christmas happen? Why couldn't she have something? Just for once? She wiped away her tears, frustrated by the weakness she felt. But even as she tried to steady her breath, the question lingered in her mind. Was this really all there was for her? The days following Christmas felt like a haze. A blur of work, deadlines, and the lingering emptiness from the holiday. Madison tried to bury herself in her tasks, keeping busy in an attempt to forget the hollow ache in her chest. But no matter how hard she worked, the image of her mother's face, the casual dismissal of her needs, kept resurfacing. It was a wound that hadn't healed, a scar that had festered beneath the surface for far too long. She sat in her apartment on New Year's Eve, sipping a cup of lukewarm tea. As the city of Chicago buzzed around her, the usual sounds of traffic and distant voices seemed muted, as though the world itself was aware of her weariness. She had hoped the new year would bring something different, but it felt like the same pattern was repeating itself. Her phone buzzed once more. A message from Caitlin. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking. "Look at the picture of my new Louis Vuitton bag on Instagram. It looks amazing. You're the best sister ever for getting me this." The words stung. The reality of it was that she had sacrificed so much for her family, only to be treated like a tool for their own selfish desires. And Caitlin, who had once been her closest ally, now seemed so far removed from the person she had hoped she could rely on. It wasn't just Caitlin, though. The message from her mother earlier that week had been equally disheartening. "The party was wonderful, dear. It felt just like old times. Everything looked perfect. Thank you for everything." But Madison knew the truth. Her mother's gratitude had a hollow ring to it. The perfect Christmas that had been so carefully orchestrated had been for everyone but her. Madison had given and given, but in return, she had received nothing. That's when the call came. It wasn't an expected call. She didn't even recognize the number. But something about it felt urgent. So she answered. "Hello? Madison. It's James. Your father." The voice on the other end was shaky, as though it carried years of regret. Madison's pulse quickened, and she felt a tightness in her chest. It had been 10 years since she'd last heard from him. And now, here he was, reaching out. It took her a moment to gather her thoughts before she responded. "Why are you calling me?" she asked, her voice tight and uncertain. I need to talk to you. There are some things we need to clear up. Things I should have said a long time ago. It's about my health, too. I've been getting some troubling news." Madison felt a rush of emotions she couldn't fully understand. Was this guilt, regret, or was it just confusion? "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she said, her voice cracking slightly. She wasn't sure if she was talking about hearing from him, or the conversation she knew was about to unfold. "I understand," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I've been watching over you. Madison, I've been following your life from afar. I never wanted to leave you." His words hung in the air, and for the first time in years, Madison felt a flicker of something that felt like a connection she hadn't known was missing. "Please," he continued, "just let me explain. Can we meet?" Madison felt the weight of his request pressing down on her. 10 years. 10 years of silence. How could she trust him now? How could she simply let him back in after everything that had happened? "I'll think about it," she said finally, "but I don't know if I'm ready to hear what you have to say." There was a long pause before her father spoke again. I understand. But please, just think about it. I need to talk to you. Madison. The line went silent, and Madison was left with her racing thoughts. She had lived her life without him. Without his presence. Without his support. She had made it this far on her own. So why now? Why after all these years was he reaching out? As the call ended, Madison felt a knot in her stomach. There was so much she needed to understand. So much she needed to learn. And yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. It wasn't just about reconciling with her father. It was about reclaiming a part of herself that had been buried for too long. The part of her that wasn't just the family Santa. The giver of gifts. The one who always made everything happen. For the first time in years, Madison wondered if it was possible for her to receive, too. As the days passed, Madison wrestled with her emotions. The invitation to meet her father weighed heavily on her mind. But it was not just about the past, it was about reclaiming her future. She had spent so many years living in the shadow of everyone else's expectations. Giving until there was nothing left for herself. It was time to stop being the family Santa. The one who always gave without ever receiving. One chilly morning, as the crisp winter air wrapped around her, Madison made a decision. She would meet her father. Not because she owed it to him, but because she owed it to herself. She couldn't keep carrying the burden of a past that was built on lies and manipulation. It was time to forge her own path. To learn the truth and finally heal the wounds that had festered for too long. When she walked into her father's office in the towering building in Midtown, it was as if the years between them had never existed. His tired eyes met hers. But there was no longer the same distance between them. They spoke, slowly, carefully, and with each word, Madison felt something shift inside her. Her father had been watching over her all these years. Sending support even when her mother had kept it from her. He had never truly abandoned her. With that, Madison began to see a glimmer of a new future. One where she was in control. Where she was no longer the one who gave endlessly without receiving. She wasn't just a daughter anymore, she was her own woman. Capable of healing. Of moving forward. Of reclaiming her life. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that true family meant mutual respect and love, not just material things. To follow more life-changing stories, subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for our next video.